All right. So today we're going to be
Diving deep.
diving deep. That's right into some
Deep waters.
deep waters. Yeah, with Dr. Umar Johnson. You know him.
Controversial figure.
Oh, controversial. Yeah, definitely, and always interesting. And we're looking at a recent interview that he did, and kind of dissecting,
His thoughts.
his thoughts. Yeah, on a lot of different topics.
Wide range.
A wide range of topics affecting the Black community in America today.
Buckle up.
Yeah, buckle up. This is going to be a good one.
Yeah. One of the
Well, yeah, go ahead.
One of the things that really stood out from this interview was
Well, yeah.
this idea of shifting political allegiances
Okay, yeah.
within the Black community.
Right. And so he's saying
Yeah.
Black voters might be,
Moving away from the
moving away
Mexicans.
from the Democrats
Yeah.
and potentially voting Republican in the future. Like,
Huge claim.
it's a huge claim, right?
Why does he think this?
Why does he think this is happening?
Well, he talks about, unfulfilled promise. Yeah. Unfulfilled promises by the Democratic Party. It's almost as if,
Like they're taken for granted.
yeah, taken for granted.
Right?
And the Black vote is just assumed it's in the bag.
Right. And they don't have to really work for it.
Exactly.
Okay, so there's that. And then he also talks about this idea that some Black voters,
Particularly men.
particularly men, are kind of drawn to Trump style.
Now,
Yeah.
that might raise some eyebrows.
I know it sounds crazy, but when you think about it, like,
Oh, he's saying
the way he explains it, he's talking about,
this bluntness.
the bluntness, like telling it like it is.
Yeah.
Like, authenticity or perceived authenticity.
Right.
You know?
Not being afraid to.
Not being afraid to
Say the controversial.
say the controversial thing. Yeah.
And so that resonates with some folks.
Right. So they feel like
And,
he's not
not sugarcoating.
Not sugarcoating it yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get it.
Okay, so if this were to actually happen, right, historically, the Black vote has been so crucial
Yeah, it's like the backbone
to
for
the Democratic Party.
the Democratic Party.
Right, so even a small shift
Yeah.
could have major implications.
Right. Like, how do elections even play out?
How do policies get shaped?
Right.
It raises all these questions about, like,
Yeah.
are political parties really representing the people they claim to?
Right. Are they actually listening?
Yeah. Are they just assuming that they have certain votes?
Right. Right.
Very
It's a
interesting.
big question. Is this a fundamental shift? Are
Mm.
we going to see this play out? And it'll be interesting to see.
We got to keep our eyes peeled.
Yeah, definitely in these upcoming elections. Now, he also talks about
Oh, relationships.
Black relationships specifically.
Oh, boy.
And he has this term,
The descent of man.
the descent of men,
So he's talking about,
primarily heterosexual women,
okay,
who are kind of rejecting these traditional,
standards.
relationship standards set by men.
Okay.
And, this is where he gets into,
The childhood trauma,
yeah,
dysfunctional family dynamics.
all playing a role in how people even view relationships.
Absolutely.
Right?
Mhm.
And their ability to form healthy connections.
Right. You know what I found interesting?
What's that?
He even suggests that people who are,
Like pushing these
pushing these negative,
relatives,
the narratives about relationships, they're,
projecting their own pain.
projecting their own unresolved issues onto others,
Like they haven't dealt with their own baggage, so they're just like
perpetuating.
perpetuating this cycle of negativity,
Yeah.
right? And distrust.
It makes you think about,
He
like,
says this.
like these broader societal narratives, even the role of media,
Yeah.
right? Like almost amplifying these
That's long shell.
dysfunctional relationship stories. And it's almost like,
Skewing people's perceptions.
yeah,
Especially about Black relationships.
it really makes you wonder,
Yeah.
how much are our own beliefs about love and partnership influenced by
By all this stuff we see and hear, right?
Yeah, by these outside forces
Yeah.
that we're bombarded with?
Yeah, it's like this self-fulfilling prophecy almost, right?
It is.
If you're always hearing these negative stories,
Yeah.
you kind of start to believe it. And
Internalize
then
it.
you internalize it. Yeah. And then your expectations are all
Warped.
warped. Yeah.
Speaking of institutions,
Okay.
he also tackles
The Black church.
the Black church,
He talks about,
declining attendance.
yeah, and this growing interest in alternative spiritual paths. Like,
Hebrew Israelites.
yeah, the Hebrew Israelite movement.
And it's important to note
Yeah.
that he acknowledges the diversity within that movement.
Okay.
It's not a monolith.
Right.
Not all groups
Okay.
reject their African ancestry.
Okay.
But he is critical of what he calls,
Religious narcissism.
yes, this tendency in various religious institutions to
Prioritize
prioritize their own
Power
and dogma.
over needs of the people.
Needs and liberation,
Yeah.
Black people.
Black people. Yeah.
It's almost like...
Religion gets in the way sometimes.
Yeah.
Instead of actually helping people,
Right.
they get caught up in their own stuff.
Their own
Power struggles and interpretations.
rigid interpretations.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating when you consider...
Historically.
Yeah, the historical context of religion
Right.
in the Black community.
Right. Like, it's been a source of
Strength.
so much strength, hope
Yeah.
in the face of oppression.
But also...
So it's also been used to control,
Right.
to manipulate.
Absolutely.
Right. So it's like this double-edged sword.
Yeah.
Okay, this next one, this is a big one. So
Buckle up.
buckle up. He says, the lack of economic opportunity for Black men.
Mm.
The way the system is almost like,
Design.
designed to keep them
Struggling.
financially, he's calling it.
A form of genocide.
Genocide.
And he's not
Whoa.
being hyperbolic here.
Okay.
He draws a parallel to Raphael Lemkin's definition, which
This is important.
includes intentionally inflicting conditions on a group
Okay.
that are designed to destroy them.
Okay.
Not just physically,
Okay.
but in part.
Okay, so he's saying
So it's not just about poverty.
Yes.
He's talking about
it's systemic.
yeah, systemic effort to keep
Black men marginalized.
and disempowered.
Yeah, I mean, he mentions the Kerner Commission report.
From 1968.
Yeah, way back in 1968.
That was put together after the race riots.
Yeah, to try to figure out, like, what was causing all
And
this.
so they said
Yeah.
flat out white institutions,
White institutions were creating
ghettos,
and sustaining
to
that
essentially trapping Black communities in this
cycle of poverty.
cycle of poverty and despair.
Yeah.
And what I find really powerful about his argument is how he connects this
To the crime.
to the crime
And
within those communities.
he's not excusing it,
No,
but he's saying when you
deny people.
deny people basic necessities, you create conditions where they can't
Provide for themselves.
provide for their families. Desperation.
Desperation.
And that fuels a vicious cycle.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he's also critical of
The Black elite.
the Black elite. He says they
achieve success.
and they become disconnected
the struggles.
from the struggles of their own community.
They don't use their resources or their influence to
They lift others,
make
challenge the systems.
that keep people trapped.
Yeah. And he brings up child support laws
Ooh.
as an example.
Weaponize.
Yeah. He feels like they're weaponized against Black men.
Trapping them in a cycle of
Debt and
debt incarceration.
further reducing their
Earning potential.
earning potential.
Right, contributing to that cycle of poverty.
Yeah. Like this.
Sobering example
Mm.
of how these policies
Yeah. Seem well-intentioned.
seem well-intentioned
and have
unintended consequences.
unintended consequences.
Yeah,
Especially when the system's already against.
stacked against them.
And it doesn't stop there.
Mm.
He goes on to
Education system.
the education system, yeah, and how Black kids
Proportionally.
are represented.
Yeah, in special ed programs.
And he doesn't believe it's just about,
Needing extra help.
no, he's saying it's a deliberate tactic to
funnel
Black children into a system that limits their potential.
Yeah, he talks about how
They're graded on
we're IEP goals.
their IEP goals
Instead of
on the same
the
standards.
same standards as everyone else.
Right, so they can just get pushed through,
Socially promoted,
Yeah.
even if they haven't.
master the skills,
Master the skills, and it just
widens the achievement gap
widens the achievement gap.
instead of closing it.
And this is not...
Theoretical for him.
No, he speaks from
Experience, he was involved in
a class action lawsuit.
a class action lawsuit
Yeah.
where Black students were
Denied access
gifted programs
and placed in special ed.
despite not needing it.
It really shows how
Bias plays out
bias plays out
in these real-world situations.
in real world situations.
Yeah, and how we need to
Advocate for our kids.
advocate for our kids.
Hold these institutions accountable.
Hold these institutions
You
accountable.
can't just assume the system's working.
Right. We have to challenge it and demand
Better.
better. Yeah,
For our children.
for our children, absolutely.
It's a powerful point, and he links this back to this idea of
Entitlement culture.
entitlement culture. Yeah.
Kids are constantly being rewarded.
Just for showing up,
Yeah, just for participating.
not for putting in
The hard work
hard work,
or striving
not
for
excellence.
excellence. And he
Yeah.
worries
Uh-huh.
this is
Setting them up for failure.
setting them up for failure,
Because the real world,
especially for Black,
especially for Black people,
doesn't give out
participation trophies,
participation trophies. You got to be
resilient,
resilient,
resourceful,
resourceful, and willing to
fight for what you want. Fight for what you want. Yeah. And he's not just complaining.
No?
He's offering a call to action.
What is he saying?
Parents got to step up.
Okay.
Get involved in their kids' education.
Push back against the system.
Push back against the system.
That's failing them.
We need to be
Advocates.
advocates.
For our children.
Yes.
Okay, this next point I found this really interesting. He talks about how,
Sometimes black people,
celebrate the downfall
other
of...
successful black people.
Yeah, he uses the example of Sean Puffy Combs
Yeah.
and the allegations against him and how,
People were kind of like,
reveling in it almost.
it's a strange phenomenon.
It is almost like there's this...
Need to see
Yeah.
successful black people taken down a peg.
And he connects it back to
The legacy of slavery,
the
specifically.
meritorious manumission.
Meritorious manumission. This
And-
was where
So this was where
slave owners would only free
a small number,
a small number of slaves
that your
based on
good behavior.
good behavior, loyalty,
So it created this
culture of competition,
culture of competition, almost a
scarcity mindset,
scarcity
the
mindset,
view mindset, yeah.
like pitted against each other.
Even in the face of
Oppression,
this horrific oppression, they're
sowing division,
sowing division.
distrust.
Yeah.
And he argues that this mentality continues today.
Okay.
We see it in the way black people
Tear each other down.
tear each other down,
Through gossip,
envy,
lack of support.
lack of support.
It's like we're afraid.
There's not enough.
There's not enough to go around.
Not enough room for everyone to thrive.
And one person's success is somehow,
Diminishing another.
yeah, it's so counterproductive.
It is.
We should be celebrating
Celebrating.
each other's wins.
Lifting each other up,
Working together.
working together.
So you create a better future.
And Dr. Johnson is calling for collective
For
upliftment.
upliftment.
Okay, so he also expresses concern about,
The rise of white supremacy.
especially among younger generations,
Younger generations he's talking about.
reports
And
of
racist behavior.
in schools
And some administrations aren't
doing it enough,
doing enough to address it.
which normalizes it.
It normalizes it, yeah.
And he's critical of white parents
Who aren't holding their kids accountable.
for racist actions.
He's saying, look,
If you're not
teaching your children,
to respect people of all races,
you're part of the problem.
you're part of the problem.
It's not enough to just not be racist.
You have to actively
combat racism.
combat racism
Yeah.
and raise your kids
To do the same.
to do the same. And he offers
Some advice.
some advice for black parents
Like dealing with racism.
directed at their children.
Okay, what's he saying?
Be assertive,
Okay.
know your rights,
Okay.
use legal avenues,
If necessary.
utilize resources.
Not a hip.
The U.S. Department of Education,
Office for Civil Rights.
Office for Civil Rights,
Okay.
to help navigate these situations.
So it's about empowering ourselves.
Empowering ourselves,
So our
children, to fight back
against injustice.
against injustice.
Okay, so this leads us to
A very interesting discussion about
who holds power
how
within the black community today.
he argues that
The big
traditional
black elite,
has been replaced
the
by,
celebrities
and he's pretty critical.
of this shift,
Yeah, he's worried that celebrities are
used by the white.
the white power structure
Yeah.
to
Is
control and pacify black America.
They
and
become
symbols,
of success and achievement.
but they often lack that
Political consciousness.
the commitment to social justice.
That those earlier
There's
generations
leaders
had, and he uses the example of Juneteenth.
becoming a federal holiday.
Yeah, and he sees it as
Obolic gesture.
a way to appease without actually addressing
the systemic issue,
police brutality.
economic inequality.
It's like a Band-Aid
A bandit.
on a gunshot wound.
And he points out that
Focus on
celebrity culture can
distract from
the grassroots
the
activism,
grassroots
the
activism.
organizing that's happening on the ground.
That's really driving change.
He sees true leadership and
Service, sacrifice,
commitment,
commitment to liberate.
not about fame and fortune.
Yeah.
Okay, so speaking of leadership and commitment,
Yeah.
he talks about
His own challenges.
building
The
the
FDMG Academy.
FTMG Academy.
This is a school he founded to
promote Pan-African leadership.
lack self-reliance
And he's faced criticism
about the timeline,
for its completion.
right?
He doesn't shy away from it.
Yeah.
He tackles it head on.
He
He defends his
transparency.
transparency
And he says he's been more open
about the process
than he needed to be.
when they needed to be.
Okay.
And he pushes back against
people who
question his
Yeah.
motives. It's just he's misusing funds.
And he highlights the
Practical difficulties,
practical difficulties. He says
especially
different-
black contractors.
black contractors, yeah.
And he shares these anecdotes about
being let down,
by people he trusted.
causing delays.
Almost like he's
Pulling back the curtain.
pulling back the curtain on the
Behind the scenes.
struggles.
Trying to build something independent.
And self-sustaining.
Sustaining.
When the system is
Working against you.
working against you. Yeah.
It highlights
The complex
of community development,
Yeah.
even with the best of intentions.
The best intentions, a clear vision,
There will be obstacles.
but he remains
Steadfast
in his
commitment.
to the FDMG Academy.
He sees it as a tangible example of when Black people
Work together,
work together
pool their resources,
and refuse to rely on
outside institutions.
outside institute.
And finally, he shares a really powerful message
Yeah.
about
African spirituality.
the role it plays in his own life.
He talks about connecting with
Ancestral roots,
ancestral roots
finding strength and guidance.
in your spiritual heritage.
And he tells this really moving story about
His visit to
Goree Island.
Goree Island,
Would
which
have
was
thought
a major slave trading post.
Right.
And he describes this profound spiritual experience
That shaped his path
ignited his passion for
Pan-Africanism.
He encourages listeners to find
Their own
spiritual anchors,
tap into the wisdom of their ancestors.
and draw strength from their
traditions.
It's about reclaiming your identity
Finding that source of power.
that can sustain you
Yeah.
in a world that's often
Hostile to your very existence.
it's a beautiful
An inspiring.
message.
Yeah.
And it brings us back to
Self-reliance.
self-reliance and
Empowerment. Surging Black people to
look
inward.
find strength
Traditions.
and build a future rooted in
Self-love.
unity and connection to their
Heritage. Yeah, it's so easy to just get caught up in the day-to-day and lose sight of like
a bigger picture.
the bigger picture, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he really challenges us to think about like the legacy we're creating,
The world we're building.
the world we're building for future generations. And one thing that really stood out to me was how he talks about reclaiming our history, our culture.
Our rightful place.
Yeah, our rightful place in the world. And it's not about
Dwelling on the past.
no, it's about
Understanding it.
yeah, learning from it
And using it
to move forward.
to fuel the movement.
Yeah. Yeah. And he's talking to everybody.
Yeah, not just Black people.
No, he's saying everybody needs to do this work.
Confront your biases
Unlearn the lies.
of white supremacy.
Become
Active allies.
in the fight for racial justice.
Yeah, he says it's not enough to just be
Not racist. You have to be
anti-racist.
anti-racist. Yeah. And that means
Actively
challenging
It's the system.
the systems working towards creating a world where everybody has an equal opportunity.
to thrive.
Yeah. So it's about
Recognizing our
interconnectedness.
understanding that
Injustice anywhere.
is a threat to justice.
Everywhere. Yeah.
His message is really a call for
Solidarity. Empathy.
a collective commitment
To building a more
just an equitable.
world.
Yeah.
And it's a message that really resonates. Even if some people find his
Very
delivery controversial or his views extreme, there's no denying that he's a
very powerful voice.
powerful voice, right?
And whether you agree or disagree
His perspective makes us think critically
about the world.
about the world around us.
He challenges us to
Move beyond our
comfort zones,
yeah,
question our
engage in
difficult conversations
it was difficult about race power,
in the future.
the future of the Black
In
community.
America.
And I think that's what makes this deep dive so
Valuable.
valuable. It's not about finding all the answers.
Or agreeing with every point.
Right. It's about
Expanding our understanding.
the complexities of
Black experience.
and the ongoing struggle for
Liberation.
it's about
Opening our mind.
to different perspectives.
Yeah, engaging
And
direct
special dialogue.
and committing ourselves to
Sure.
the work of creating a more just
And equitable.
world for all.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into
Powerful.
the powerful and provocative ideas of
Dr. Umar Johnson.
we want to leave you with this keep questioning
Keep learning.
and
Keep pushing for change.
remember that
Eating.
true liberation is a journey, not a destination.
And it requires
To show up
to speak up.
and do the work.
Thanks for joining us on the deep dive.
We'll see you next time.
See you next time.